Welcome to another edition of the Insight Show with myself, Jaswant Singh Bora, here on the Akaal Channel on the Sky Network. And joining me today is an MEP from the Conservative Party by the name of Anthea McIntyre. Anthea, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Pleased to have you. You're a current MEP for the Conservative Party. You were an MEP back in 2011. You were re-elected due to your hard work and efforts. And you're the party spokesperson in the European Parliament on environment and on agriculture and rural affairs. And you've had previous political engagements in constituencies such as Redditch and Shrewsbury. And you're also the chair of the European Parliament Friends of Kashmir.
Yes.
So quite a big responsibility there, global responsibility. But welcome to the show. We're pleased to have you. Really, it's a question where there's so much going on in Parliament in Europe. We see what Boris Johnson has been proposing within Parliament and in prorogation. We've talked about the law, the Ben Act, the decision of the Supreme Court. And we see now that there are also the allegations coming to the surface. But give and take all what's happened, Anthony, in your view, would you say that this is one of the most challenging times for British politics and what's currently going on in Parliament and decisions that have to be made? There's a sense of uncertainty.
I think it's a very challenging time and really quite unsettling for people because Brexit is dominating everything. And, you know, I wish we could get beyond that and talk about the issues that are really important to people. But we've been hung up on Brexit for, 3 years now. I think that there is light at the end of the tunnel. I'm really hopeful that we will actually get a deal, because I don't want us to leave without a deal. But of course, you know, the Prime Minister is quite right to leave no deal as an option, because if you take that away, then he hasn't really got a bargaining position. So I think we've seen just in the last day or so that the Prime Minister has put forward a proposal of how we can have a deal, how we can leave. And I just hope that the European side responds positively and that we can reach a compromise and move on.
That's something that Donald Tusk has also said. He's open to some new deals and new negotiations. Europe seems, and you're right there in Europe, it seems quite optimistic that there's something that could happen come 17, 18 or 19 of October, considering we've got less than a month to go before leaving. And obviously there's great ramifications if we do not get a deal. But as you said, we have to keep the no deal on the table as a possible option and see where we go from there. So Donald Tusk feels optimistic about it.
Well, I'm glad about that. I think that we need optimism on all sides, and we need a sense of compromise. We need people to understand what the issues are, to understand that actually for all sides a deal is the best way for us to leave. But it's also important that they realise on the European side that we are leaving. And although, you know, I actually campaigned to remain in the referendum, but I'm a Democrat. Country voted to leave, and that's what we must deliver. And the sooner we do it, the better, because then we can get on with the domestic agenda that I think will make a big difference for everybody. I
think that's something that David Cameron wanted, was to stay and build a better Britain from within inside of Europe. People leaving or choosing to leave, it was more about really trying to make Britain more sovereign and stand in a position of more power and authority. And it's been said...
a lot of people in our region, the West Midlands, particularly, you know, sort of Walsall, Dudley, across the West Midlands, were very keen to take back control of laws, as you say, into our own hands. And that's why I think they voted to leave. But, you know, that's what the majority said. And we've got to deliver that.
We heard Michael Grove speak in Parliament and referring to safeguarding Britain's interests and referring to Operation Yellowhammer. The document really outlines a worst case scenario for Britain. Would you say that give and take all these documents and reviews that are currently taking place and people trying to manage this process of Brexit, is there hope at the end of the tunnel? I mean, couple of weeks from now or less than that, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, goes to Brussels for a summit and negotiating, and hopefully we'll have something we can move forward, because there's people's livelihoods at stake here. We're talking about free movement, and you worked within the business sector yourself. What are some of the concerns for the business sectors in terms of free movement, business relations possibly collapsing, Britain being put at the back of the queue when it comes to trade deals and negotiations? There's a lot of concerned people out there maybe watching and saying, well, what do I do? Which direction do I go?
I think that there is a lot of uncertainty. And I think particularly businesses on the whole don't mind what happens as long as they know what's going to happen and they can plan for it. And they haven't really been able to. I think it's important for example, for our automotive industry, which operates in just-in-time manufacturing, it's important that we can get the parts into the country easily and with as little delay as possible to enable that production line to keep going. So they have very genuine concerns that it's important that we keep, that we have a deal so that we can keep trading as easily as we are at the moment. And you have also on the other side farmers. I mean, people that in the sort of the western side of my region, because my region covers the whole of the West Midlands down, down the board with Wales as far as Gloucester and so on. So the sheep farmers are really concerned, because if we don't have a deal, they will be facing something like 42% in tariffs for exporting, and that will really be very, very difficult for our farmers. So I think everybody wants us to get a deal. And frankly, I think the EU 27 want a deal as well. It'd be damaging for everyone. So that's why we've got to find a compromise, and we've got to make a deal.
There'll be additional strains on ports as well, and we've seen places could be gridlocked and people trying to cross over, and it could take days or weeks. We're talking about visas and passports, and UK border agency could be stretched. So it seemed as though the effect and the impact it's going to have in a broad range. I mean, we're talking about protecting the rights of British workers and those also working in Europe. To what extent is there a guarantee that the rights of British workers abroad working and equally in this country could be preserved or renegotiated? The TUC speak about that, and we're talking about Jeremy Corbyn talking about being more democratic in them processes. Is the Conservatives democratic in them processes? We've just had the conference and something promising came up. Sajid Javid announced a pay rise of £10 something over the next 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, an increase in the minimum wage is
that hope for Britain? Is that hope for individuals?
Of course it is. I mean, we have more people in work in the UK now than ever before. And to make sure that our industry continues to thrive requires us to be able to hire people. So we have a lot of people from Europe and beyond, and we need to have people with skills coming into the country. I'm very encouraged by the fact that we've now said that if you come and go to university here and do a degree, you will be able to stay afterwards. And that's very, very important, because the universities will often spin off small businesses which are the results of the work of their students, and they need to be able to do that. And so that is one particularly good thing. But we've said all along that citizens' rights are really important, that other nationalities, other European nationalities that are here need to have the same deal as they do now. They are welcome. They are desperately needed. I mean, if you look at the number of people from abroad who are running the health service, providing skilled input in our manufacturing, in our software design, there's a huge demand for these skills. So Britain can't just cut itself off, and we've got no desire to do so. We've got to encourage people to keep coming so that we get the skills we need. And at the same time, we're saying, well, British citizens that are working around Europe also need protection, But to be fair, that was the first thing that was discussed. I mean, when Theresa May very first triggered Article 50, that was what we were being told. That is the key thing. We want to protect citizens' rights.
You was part of that cabinet with Theresa May yourself. You were involved within.
Well, I wasn't part of the cabinet for sure, but I was still an MEP. Still have always been very much linked with the Conservative government. And in the last European Parliament, I was on the employment committee. So all the various employment measures are important. And I think that we have to strike a balance with employment law that says the worker has to be properly protected. But I know, talking to companies who are thinking about investing, they don't want to invest in a country like France because the protection laws are so draconian that it's very, very difficult to start a business and to make changes once you have. So the key to success in our country is attracting the right people to come and work, giving them decent wages for a decent job, protecting their rights, but not tying the hands of employers to the extent that they just give up and don't try.
Would you say that other political parties are somewhat disheveled in a bit of disarray or disorder? I mean, we talk about the Brexit party, say we need to come out and protect the sovereignty of Great Britain. Labour, Jeremy Corbyn speaks about unlawful prorogation. There's no reason to shut down Parliament. But what about if the shoe was on his feet? How do you think other parties would handle this situation regarding Brexit? And we've seen Lib Dems. Well, we've tracked it to Lib Dems.
What Corbyn wants to do with Brexit. I mean, we don't want to know actually what he wants to do for most of the time. He was clamouring to have a general election. Must have a general election, but when asked to vote to have one,
Boris Johnson, he gave him two options.
It was extraordinary.
Yes.
And he's got a very divided party. Some of them want to have another referendum and be a party of Remain. The Lib Dems at least have been clear about what they want. They're definitely Remainers. But if you look at the different personalities in the Labour Party, they're totally split. So, but you know, let's leave them to their own private grief. I'm much more interested in putting forward Conservative policies, getting beyond Brexit, delivering all the improvements we want to see in the health service, in the police. There are lots of things that are just waiting to get done if we could just get beyond this Brexit impasse.
That's something that Boris Johnson has also made very clear in his speeches in Parliament, and talking around things like we'll deal with Brexit and allow him to deal with Brexit, allow him to make them decisions and in the interest of the British public and Parliament and others. And he spoke around, as you rightly said, Anthea, regarding some of the local issues, regionally, nationally. We're talking about violent crime, gang crime, we're talking about NHS, schools. There's also issues around poverty and homelessness. I mean, the government introduces a new act in 2017 and it talks about how to reduce these issues. Are we, at the expense of Brexit, ignoring or leaving aside the real issues that are impacting right here in West Midlands, Birmingham and the UK?
I don't think we're ignoring them. I think what we're saying is that it will be easier to get on with those once we've got Brexit out of the way. But, I mean, here in the West Midlands, we've got Andy Street, Conservative mayor, who is really delivering for the West Midland region. I mean, we're going to be the sort of automotive hub. I mean, he's talking about the gigafactory that will create, make batteries for electric cars. And there's a possibility of about 11,000 new jobs. Now, those are the things, they are already happening. And Andy Street has been leading the way. And I think why I like what he does is he's a businessman, first and foremost. Even when he was standing for election, he took the time to go off to both India and Pakistan to talk to chambers of commerce and to talk about trade. Now, that's hugely important for our region. And he's somebody that's not hidebound by the sort of political dogma. He will do what is best for the region and use his immense business experience to deliver for the people of the West Midlands.
You mentioned India and Pakistan, and this is another issue that's been on the media. There are impact and implications just in business terms and political terms. We have the President Modi and regarding the tension, and you've been to Kashmir, you've been to India, so you've been quite intricate in some of them processes. The revocation of Article 370 by the government and the impact that's having within that Kashmir and that small state of Kashmir, and the people that are being wounded or injured or beaten or you know, the sheer degree of brutality that's taking place because of this piece of land, which is quite historical. What do you feel, and you're the part of the European Parliament for the Friends of Kashmir, how do you think we can resolve some of the tension, some of the issues that's happening in Kashmir currently, give and take what Modi says, and Britain does play a part, especially in terms of helping and negotiating and probably being a neutral individual to see which is in the best interest, give and take. India are saying it's our land and Pakistan are saying it's our land.
Well, I think as far as Kashmir is concerned, we need to be able to apply the UN resolution, and we need, I think, self-determination for the people of Kashmir. I think they need to be asked what they want to do and have the plebiscite that was promised, 70 years ago. So that needs to happen. I feel wherever there are wrongs, we have to be prepared to stand up for human rights. So I think it's important, and I do call out the use of pellet guns against small children in Kashmir is something we cannot possibly tolerate. And I'm a big fan of India. My father was actually born in Assam, so I have a great love
interest,
of India,
yes,
and a great interest, and I've visited on more than one occasion and been fascinated by all that India has to offer. And above all, India is a democracy. I mean, an old democracy. And what I cannot understand is why those democratically elected members of the Lok Sabha allow what's going on in Kashmir to happen. I don't think they would if they really understood the devastation. And so it breaks my heart when I talk to people living in Srinagar and around there who actually feel that I mean, somebody said to me that they don't lock their door because when the troops come, if they want to burst in, they'd rather they didn't break it. So, but living with that sort of level of fear, that is you know, I cannot understand that, and I cannot support it.
That doesn't really show a degree of probably commitment from governments to probably want to address these issues. I mean, President Modi was in America quite recently. President Trump and other dignitaries were there in Dallas, Texas, and he addresses the state and America and some of the developments of India and America. And President Trump welcomes him and talks around looking at creating more middle-class Indians and because of their commitment and their investments in business in America. These are some things that we need to see happening more, but obviously because of Brexit and what's currently going on, do you think some of that will be tarnished, even though India is apart from
there's no doubt we all want to trade with India. The European Union has been trying to get a trade deal, but it's very difficult because India is concerned that we will flood the market with cheese or various commodities that they think will compete. I don't think actually that's going to be the case at all. I think it's entirely comes down to politics, and we'll have to wait until there are the right conditions where India feels that they're going to benefit from trade deals, and where they can also, in my view, they will have to demonstrate some commitment to human rights as well. If you've got a document from the UN setting out what needs to happen, I mean, it was calling on India, as far as Kashmir is concerned, to do quite a long list of things, and we also a list for Pakistan to do. So it's not all one-sided. It is, you know, balanced, but I find it difficult, particularly I think maybe as a woman, to see the women and the children suffering. And I'm not prepared to stay quiet about that. That's why I visited, when I did, visited Kashmir. I've heard stories firsthand from people, and certainly in the European Parliament I want to make those clear and demand that some action is taken.
Yeah, it's also a question of other countries. You talk about human rights and violation of human rights, and that's why we have articles and conventions, and it was formed a good number of years ago. We see that with Russia and probably part of Syria and other countries.
Look at Iran.
Iran, and especially India having expressed interest as a Security Council and playing a role within the UN, and maintaining resolutions is quite important.
Indeed. I think it's quite reasonable that any country that is aspiring to be part of the Security Council does make sure that it complies with resolutions.
To what extent will the information sharing, because of Brexit, we talk around, example, European arrest warrants, and they're quite useful for deporting people back to stand trial because of particular crimes. To what extent these are be put at risk, whereby Europol or others will be unable to share information if we come out of Europe? Essentially, some doors will shut, and we'll have to go back and look at other methods. But there are key concerns around information, intelligence sharing, especially will that enable crime and terrorism to flourish in the UK or Europe?
Well, it's an interesting thing, because a little earlier you mentioned, passport controls and so on. But the UK and Ireland have never been part of Schengen. So we've never been part of this complete free movement. So any time I go from here to Brussels and come home, I have to show my passport, both sides. So that isn't going to change. So we don't have to worry about lots more customs checks. But as far as all the various European West Warrant, Europol, Eurojust and so on, about 5 years ago, we were looking, maybe a little longer now, the UK had the opportunity to opt out of the Justice and Home Affairs measures of the EU. And it was actually when Theresa May was Home Secretary. And she looked at it and basically said, look, we can't be part of the European Court of Justice. We're going to opt out of all those, of the block of Justice and Home Affairs measures, which she did. And then she opted back in to to several things, including European arrest warrant, for example. It was reformed, revised, and is a very useful tool.
MI5 agreed to that. They chose to stay and remain in Europe.
Yeah, so it seems to me that when we start looking at the future arrangements between the UK and the rest of Europe, those are the sorts of things we need to sort out. So once we get the withdrawal deal done, that, I'm afraid, isn't the end of it. That's almost just the beginning, because then we need to negotiate our future relationship, which will cover all manner of things, like the European arrest warrant and all sorts of other things, which we need to negotiate. So that is partly why I'm hoping that we get a deal and that we get a couple of years transition in which to sort out all these things.
As you say, there's things to be ironed out, and hence the voice of policy or democracy needs to be amplified on these spaces. There's a lot more at stake, just as you said, leaving the EU and Brexit, and there's all these other aspects which we discussed. But in a nutshell, and we're coming to the close of the show, Anthea, what are some of the ways forward? Now we've discussed some stuff. In a nutshell, how would you see Britain to move forward from a Conservative point of view?
I think the biggest thing for the Conservatives is to make sure the opportunity is there. We really believe in equal opportunity for everyone. And Boris himself said in the conference that it isn't the case at the moment, and that the North doesn't have as much opportunity as the South. We've got to correct that. Every child in Britain needs to have the same opportunity to thrive and grow and succeed. Every family needs to be able to provide for itself, which means good jobs and the opportunity to make progress, so that people can take control of their own lives, look after their families and have a job.
Well, Anthea, thank you very much indeed for sharing your views, as I know you're busy with what's going on with Europe and Parliament. We thank you for coming onto the show. And to our viewers at home, thank you for watching. My name is Jaswant Bora from the Insight Show. Until next time, take care and God bless.